Welcome back to A Fresh Story, the podcast where we have conversations about brave decisions to start over again. I'm Olivia.
And I'm Jenny, and we're so glad you're here today.
Hello, 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 sister.
Well, hello there, my sister, my fresh
my
sister.
friend and
I was
sister.
gonna say fresh sister. Olivia's wearing her fresh sweatshirt, and
Jenny and I don't. We don't wear anything except our fresh start stuff.
I'm not that bright, so I saw the word and I read it and I said it out loud.
Fresh sister.
Fresh sister.
How is it going?
Good. I had to have a talk with our parents last night, so that was tough. Yeah, I had to tell them that I felt very betrayed by the fact. I know. I don't think they were happy about it either. I found out that there's a dish in Italian families where they take leftover pasta and they mix it with eggs and cheese and meat, and then they like fry it. And nobody's
like a
ever.
Kugel.
It's like a kugel, yeah, or like a frittata with leftover pasta is what they call it. And they never introduced that to us. And, there are some things you can forgive. There are some things you can forgive and some things you simply can't. So it was a tough conversation for us.
I'm so sorry you had to have that conversation with them.
It's kind of a Cold War right now. We're not really talking to each other.
Well, and our stepfather is like Italian through and through.
Italian American.
Yeah.
Like Long Island Italian American. We don't really think of him as a stepfather. He's a bonus dad. Right. Not to correct Olivia, but he's our father.
Right.
No, not a name. He is our father.
We grew up having Sunday dinner with his Italian family.
Dinner with his family, and we still have Sunday dinner every Sunday. He makes something. I mean, he makes like Italian food. Well, let's be honest.
He makes dinner most nights.
Oh, I just meant he made Italian food on Sundays.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't eat if he didn't cook. That's a privilege. Yes,
it's a privilege.
It's a huge privilege, and we're very grateful. And he makes great like Italian food.
Yeah. Chicken cutlets,
meatballs, chicken cutlets. Oh, the fish, like different pasta dishes. There's a lentils dish, a lentil pasta dish that he makes. There's pasta ciccia, which is pasta and chickpeas.
Bianca Machadi.
Easter pie, like all these things.
Salami rolls.
No salami rolls. I once got his mother, our grandma Zita's salami rolls. I once ate so many when I was down in Maryland. I got so sick. I didn't know what a portion was. Well, don't laugh at me. It's fine. I was rolling around on the floor. I was in so much pain.
You were salami rolling.
I was a salami roller. I was just a salami roller.
Which brings us to today's guest. Who is our today's guest, sister? Friend?
Our guest today is our gym teacher from when we were little, from when I was 7 and when Olivia was 9. I don't remember exactly when he stopped being our gym teacher.
Early 90s.
But he was a gym teacher, a PE teacher.
Yeah.
And he was actually the director of the program, I found out.
Yeah.
And now he is an award-winning photographer with the New York Times.
And he's a producer, writer, director. Right.
He is amazing. He had a fascinating story that, of course, why would I know that? I was 7 and he was my phys ed teacher, but a story about growing up in the East Village with his uncle and meeting Allen Ginsberg.
So Andrew Scrivani is not just an accomplished New York Times best award-winning photographer, writer, director. He literally does all the things. But really the thread through all of this is he is an amazing storyteller.
Yeah.
And
he says yes.
He says yes to things. And I'm just so like effing excited to see what his life takes him because he's so talented. And also we talk about this a lot, which is something you and I are very passionate about, is like lifting people up with you as you rise the ranks.
Yeah.
And we talk about that a lot. And it's something that you and I are so devoted to. And he is just incredible.
I didn't even connect this to Olivia, but like you have helped your former students get jobs and you've pulled them in and you've employed them at certain times. Yeah. And one of Andrew's like main photography assistants for years, now the DP on his movie, which he talks about, is a classmate of Olivia's who was one of Andrew's students.
Yeah, it's true.
And who's hopefully coming on the podcast. Devin, we're talking to you.
Yeah. So it's an amazing conversation. And if you don't follow him and his podcast, we'll put everything in the show notes. But all of his work is just so beautiful, and there's so much like meaning behind everything he does. So
yes, infused with meaning.
And if you are somebody interested in food photography and the business of food photography and everything, you don't want to miss a moment with him. So enjoy the conversation with Andrew, and please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to A Fresh Story so that we can keep telling fresh start stories. Andrew is an award-winning photographer, director, and producer who has worked on editorial, publishing, advertising, content creation, and documentary and feature film projects for the last 20 years. Andrew is also a certified leadership and performance coach and consultant, internationally recognized workshop instructor, author, and columnist. He recently launched his own online learning platform in April of 2022 called the Andrew Scrivani Academy, which I'm really excited to talk about today and learn more about. But we know him for 3 decades in a little bit of a different capacity because he was our physical education teacher back when he was probably very young, which we'll
back when
we
called it gym class.
We called it gym class back in the day. So thank you for taking the time to talk to us. It's really, really nice to see you and for being here.
Well, I'm not the only one who's gone through some changes since the last time we were together.
This is
true. Those were the days. I started that job back in 1994, and I was 24 years old.
Yeah. Crazy.
And I was given an opportunity to do something that was sort of outside of my experience level. And I took the opportunity. I didn't set out to become a gym teacher, but when they offer you a director's title when you're 24 and a salary that was more than I could have imagined making at that time, I jumped at it and turned out pretty well because I met some really great people who turned into really great adults. In that process, some of them who are still in my life.
Yeah,
yourselves included.
That's awesome. No, it's a small community. We talk a lot about the Eastwoods. That heyday of Eastwood's life back then was a special time. It really was.
I also worked at that school, and I was not surprised by the salary I got. So I think you hit it at the good time.
Yeah, the mid 90s were the expectations were a little bit lower. And gas was 99 cents a gallon.
Yeah, it was a little different.
Yeah, it went a little further. Well, we practiced. I practiced Andrew, not Mr. Scrivani before we came on the podcast. But we are so excited. I remember, I could have told you 1994 because I remember I was 7. I remember all the gym teachers, before you and after you. And it's very clear. And you were a different kind of energy in the school. So it was a very exciting time. And we're very excited to have you here today. Would you like to take us back to the beginning of your Fresh Starts journey?
Well, which one do you want to start with? I've had so many of them. It feels like I'm on a regular cycle of fresh starts. The first big one clearly was getting into photography when I was going through an interesting and rough patch in my life. I was going through a divorce, and I had this sort of burning urge to do something creative with my life. And I had been friends with photography folks in college, and I was an amateur, sort of talented amateur at that point. And I decided, okay, well, I'm going to start hanging out with my old friends because it's what one does after a divorce. And I ended up getting some opportunities that I couldn't have anticipated. And it turned out that my first professional assignment was with the New York Times.
Which is amazing. And how did that come to be?
I met the editor and subsequently married her. But I met the editor. She and I struck up a friendship. She asked me, "Hey, you're from Staten Island. We have this assignment in Staten Island. Nobody wants to go there. Would you go do it?" And it happened to be a place. And I've written about this, and it's an interesting kind of thing. Is like when I was a kid, we used to ride our bikes to this ice cream shop. And it turned out this was what I was being asked to photograph. So I had this intimate experience with it. And I think ultimately, when I think about it, it sort of shaped the way I approached food photography philosophically for the rest of my career, which was shoot what you know.
You started this place in like extreme alignment too, right? Like it was very full circle. So you start in alignment, you're only going to move in alignment after that.
Yeah, because it worked and I felt comfortable there and I knew what I wanted to do. And it was because I was so familiar with what I was doing. So food photography in the way that I ended up doing it fit so well into my personal history and the things that I was passionate about and family and culture. And it seems like everything grew from there. So it was an interesting way to start. And then of course I was in the right place at the right time with the right skill set, where the photography industry was going through a seismic transition between film and digital. And I was uniquely positioned to make the transition because I did not have any real history in film. I mean, I did shoot film and I did shoot, but I wasn't of that culture.
Right.
I was born. So as much as I am 20 or so years your senior, I am as digital native as you are.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I grew up with computers professionally in a way that a lot of younger people do. So I think that that's helped me relate to people who are learning, because it's also, you know, from another perspective of, you know, the anxiety of learning something new and trying something new and reinventing yourself and getting a fresh start and, you know, trusting those feelings that you have that you want to try something new or try something different and taking risks. You know, I was intimately familiar with all those because photography for me at that point was an extra way to make a couple of bucks to pay the bills that I wasn't quite sure how I was going to pay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you take us back a step? So you mentioned when we were just talking that gym teacher wasn't your plan.
No.
What was the plan? Where you went to school, you came out, like what was the plan? What were you doing right before the food photography? I'm super curious about that.
I wanted to be an English professor. I have a degree in English literature.
Amazing.
I have a literary family as well as a literary name. And my uncle, who is my sort of mentor.
Yes, Scrivani. I never thought about that.
And he still is my mentor. He's also a writer, a translator, you know, he's a polylinguist.
Okay. Polyglot?
Polyglot. Yeah, he speaks like 8 languages. And
amazing.
You know, at that point, I wanted to do that. That's what I wanted to do. I was around poets and writers, and I was hanging out in the East Village as a teenager. I met Allen Ginsberg and Amiri Baraka and, you know, William Burroughs and Neil Tchaikovsky. I met all these people as a child, you know, because these were my uncle's friends.
That's amazing.
Right. So I had this huge influence of literature in my life, but I was also a Division I college athlete.
Okay.
So I had this sort of duality to who I was as a person, because I was living this jock life, but when I wasn't throwing a ball, I was reading poetry or writing, or even writing poetry at that point. Not very good, by the way.
Nobody is at that point, is what I found out.
It's very true. So like that, you know, was an opportunity. At the time I was engaged to be married. I wanted to sort of start my adult life, and this job came along and I sort of got into it. And look, it was a part of who I was too. It wasn't, and I liked being around kids. I had been working with kids in youth programs and coaching since I was in high school. So it still was a natural fit. So it's not like, oh my God, I got sucked down this hole that, you know, it was just a different part of who I was. And I figured, well, you know, at some point I'll figure it out. And then photography came along.
Yeah. And I know too, from being a former teacher myself, the skills I learned as a middle school teacher, I use every single day in business. So, you know, I'm sure whatever you learned, and I can't even imagine teaching phys ed is a whole different game than teaching Latin, which is what I did. But, you know, those interpersonal human skills, you can apply them to anything. And I found that they really helped me kind of like get out of my comfort zone in business. So I'm sure, you know, it was something that you felt probably too.
Well, more than you know. I keep a list in my phone, and I've actually worked it into an outline for another book that I want to write, and it's called Work. And it's the exact thesis of what you just said. The things that I've learned from all the jobs that I've had. And it starts from being a a paper boy as a kid and understanding how to provide customer service, right? Yeah. And that's something I took with me. And then working with unions when I was working in a graveyard as a teenager, and now as a producer, I have to work with union people. Mm-hmm. So like everything has some kind of analog parallel, step off point to use for something else. So there's no job that you can take where you can't take something with you.
I love 100%. That. I love that. So you start shooting and you're shooting on digital, and your first thing, what was it like to see your work in the New York Times, first of all? Like
it was crazy. I was running a day camp in Staten Island. So this is obviously post Eastwoods.
Yeah.
And the article comes out, and it's a big deal in Staten Island because it's one of our places on the cover of the New York Times food section.
Wow.
And it ran really big. So I'm running around the camp showing everybody this picture, and people are looking at me like, wait a second, what are you doing? What?
Yeah.
They couldn't grasp it for a while. And then, I stayed at the school long after I was already a well-known photographer because my daughter was going to school there.
Okay.
And as a divorced parent, it was a way of being in her life every single day.
Yeah, I love that.
So I stayed there probably about 4 years too long. But it was okay. I mean, at that point, I was working in the admissions department. I was more of a public relations sort of marketing guy at that point, rather than working in the gym in my sweatpants every day.
Yeah.
But I was still coaching baseball, and I was still enjoying the camaraderie of being around my colleagues. And then when she was like, "Dad, you really need to not be here," I was like, "Okay, see ya.
Bye.
I'm out."
Yeah. So what was the next step after that?
Well, then I went full time as a photographer, and I got really busy at that point. So from the years of like 2007 to 2015, I literally don't know where those years went. I did not look up. That was where the bulk of my career happened in terms of, relatively. I wasn't a full-time employee, but I was working nonstop for the Times. Plus, I had several magazine contracts. I was doing advertising work. It was photo all day long. And then from that, at the back end of that is when I started directing television commercials. I got mentored by somebody who's still in my life, who's really great, to learn how to direct and produce. And then the funny part about the working as a director and then understanding production, from coming from photo and then having the film stuff sort of creep in, was a buddy that I met while working at Staten Island Academy, when I was in my office role there. He went off to become a director. He went to USC Film School, got his master's in directing, came back and was like, "I'm starting this film company. Can you direct a commercial for me?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, great." And then while he's doing the pitch for the film company that he's launching, I'm like, "Hey, I want to be involved in this." I said, how can I help? And then I became his film partner, and then we made Team Marco. It was
amazing.
My life has been some strange, fresh starts.
I think you use your photography. I mean, the way that I see your art, like, it is so poetic and meaningful, the way that you shoot things. And so it's interesting to me to find all this out, because it so makes sense. And then watching you sort of like Forrest Gump your way through life of like, then I met this person, then I met that person. Like, it makes sense because you have all these things and you've just been drawing it all in this whole time, and it propels you. I mean, it takes a lot of talent. Like, it's not, it takes a lot of talent, a lot of work. I have no doubt, but like, it's interesting to see how it has projected you.
I appreciate, by the way, the sentiment about my work. But I think it's also about being open to possibility. And I think that we quite often get stuck in wherever we are, not remembering what could be possible, and saying yes a lot of times is the door that gets opened, and being able to be personable and, be empathetic. And I think a lot of what you're saying about being a kindergarten teacher resonates with me too. And I think, it's sort of propelled me in this sort of idea of never letting go of being an educator. It's something like people ask me, like, well, what do you consider yourself at this point? You do all these different things. And I'm like, well, I'm an artist by trade, but I'm a teacher by vocation.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that those two things sort of work together really well when you sort of understand what your intentions are.
Yeah, and that resonates a lot with me too. And something that's interesting that also resonates with me is everything that I've done in my life, I never really had formal training in, but I just figured it out, right? And so I would love to hear a little bit more about how you ended up in food photography, because I mean, I want to just like brag about you for a second, but you are like the food photographer. Like, you have changed the industry. You are educating the next generation of food photographers. You have all the courses and education that you do. So how did you end up in food photography and knowing, I mean, what to do and like how to organize yourself and the whole thing?
Well, I had good teachers. You know, my wife, who obviously I met in the photo industry, had a head start on me. Sujong was the director of photography at Ladies Home Journal, and then landed at the New York Times, and that's how we met, through mutual friends in the photo industry. So I had some really good foundational help in terms of what I wanted to do. And then, of course, coming from a food background in my family, you know, being an Italian American, second generation, you know, like lots of, you know, cultural
Sunday sauce, right? Sunday sauce.
Sunday sauce, you know, the cultural touch points and understanding what that meant to me, understanding how I wanted to translate and tell that story.
Right.
That's sort of how it happened. And then I actually started in food photography in a studio setting as the stylist.
Okay.
Because I knew how to cook. So my best friend who taught me photography was the first photographer I worked with on a food shoot. And we did two big ones together. We did a Thanksgiving spread for the Times back in 2002. And then we did the Super Bowl that year.
Wow.
And
he didn't want to be holidays.
and he didn't want to be a food photographer. He had no interest in being a food photographer. So at a certain point, I stepped in to start taking the photos, but I got this sense by being around it, both from a styling perspective and then knowing what to do as a photographer, and then figuring out how I wanted to translate it into my, you know, into the way I see it.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, I had a lot of opportunity to let it evolve naturally because there was no pressure. There was no social media. You know, there was very little expectations of what even the Times food section was supposed to look like. It was all about, at that point, it was all about, you know, Bon Appetit and Savoir and Food and Wine. And, you know, that's what people cared about. You know,
well, especially back then, right? Like it's printed gourmet, in a newspaper, right? So it's like not going to be the best quality photo. Right. And then also whatever was online, we're still not getting the best quality, right? Because of the slow dial-up connection. So that's fascinating. So you got to evolve in this space and then sort of blow the world away when come 2010 when everything starts, you know, being digital. And that's a really interesting meeting point of talent and technology
timeline.
You know, I use sports metaphors a lot as I can't escape that part of my life. And I feel like at that point I was sort of like the quarterback who got to sit behind the starter and watch how to be the superstar. And by the time it was my time to shine, it was just, the platform was so huge.
Yeah.
I had the stage all to myself for quite a while.
Yeah.
And I think that was something that, you know, that'll never happen again in this industry.
Yeah.
But it was at that time where I was able to sort of figure out what I wanted to say. And then by the time anybody was listening, it was a pretty well-developed, you know, idea. So, but opportunities come, you have to be willing to, you know, be unafraid to step into the door and not know what's on the other side.
Yeah, and something that I love that you do, because I've watched you all these years and I know who you work with a little bit because I grew up with them too, is you are really good about a rising tide, right? So like you believe if you can succeed, then you want to bring other people up with you to succeed. And like I feel like that's maybe because you've had other people do that for you. And so you're so passionate about doing that to other people. So can you talk a little bit about kind of like how you maybe work when you are on set, or who you bring in to work with you, and how you develop your team, because everybody knows that that's the biggest part about being like a successful person, is developing the team that you work with.
Well, you're touching on a person and a circumstance that is very present right now. So about a week ago, I was putting together a camera team for my new film, which is called Silver Fox, which we're filming next month. It's a short film that's going to become a feature next year. And Devin Knight, who we are all intimately acquainted with, as he was a student with Jenny and Olivia, and was my student, and I coached him when he was a boy. He has been my assistant and my much more than that, a friend and a collaborator and a partner in my work for the past decade plus. So one of my goals for Devin, when he decided to become a videographer, was eventually to bring him along in our film business. And it's been a slow progress. And I added him to the camera team for Silver Fox. And then life happened. The DP dropped out. So Devin got elevated to DP.
Wow.
So Devin is now going to be the DP on his first film.
I didn't even know that. I knew that,
That's so exciting.
We follow Devin, and it's been a rough couple of years for him with some stuff. And so we're so happy. Well, and he's an amazing person. I've known him since I was 3. So amazing. And again, back to like those early connections that you make in those communities, the Eastwoods community, those early, like those really do impact you. I mean, we work, a bunch of our fresh starts experts are people we grew up with at Eastwoods, and
people that you had
that you were your students. And when I went back to, because I went back to teach at Eastwoods for almost a decade in my early 20s, and I was mentored by Marsha Creighton and Wayne Hunnicky, and like all of these people that changed my life because they believed in me and what I could do. So I love that so much. So what's coming up for you in these next couple years? Because I feel like you do so many things, and I want to talk a little bit about your new platform too.
Yes. Well, I mean, the film stuff is happening. Obviously, my photo work has taken on a different tilt in different ways. I'm going to be launching a new promo that kind of changes the way people might see my photography, because the trip that I took to Sicily last year to teach and be on camera, I shot so much lifestyle and travel and all this portraiture and beautiful photography in Sicily. And I'm putting together a promo about that. So I want to sort of relaunch myself as a photographer, as somebody who gets off the tabletop. So that's sort of the next evolution of what I want to be as a photographer, is seen as somebody who's mastered this one thing, but now it's time to do some other stuff. And then obviously the film stuff is really primary right now, because Silver Fox is it's a passion project for both Julio and I. Julio is a gay man in his 40s. And we've been friends for over 20 years. And my mentor, George, who is my uncle who introduced me to the literature world, is also a gay man in his 70s. So we came up with a concept. And then we met a young man who was the star of Team Marco, Owen Vaccaro, who is a gay boy in his teens. So we came up with a film concept of putting those 3 generations of gay men in one room. And the inciting incident is that Joe Fox is a stand-up comedian who is celebrating his 25th year of being out on tour around the country doing his comedy act. And his comedy act has come home now. And he decides he's going to go out for the final show in full drag. And the 3 generations are there, the angel and the devil, the older generation and the younger generation, telling him why he has to do this or why he should absolutely not do this. So this is Silver Fox. It's sort of set up like a play where it all happens in one room.
I love that.
And it's been a real labor of love for all of us. And we're really proud that it's going to actually get filmed, and that it's a family affair. It's me and Julio and Devin and Casey and all my people are all around us. And we're going to kind of go in there and take this on. So
I love
it will be, it's also going to be a short that's featured by the screening room of the New Yorker.
Amazing.
It sounds amazing. I feel like it's going to end up being a play that and then you're going to have another, like, you know, feather in your cap of, you know, stage director or something, stage producer. I also think, just speaking that you mentioned unions, you mentioned all of this and your whole upbringing, the production world, like I worked in event production, and it is such a unique place to spend that much time with people, and the way that it works, and you're collaborating with the unions and things like that. It's just a very, if it is a healthy environment, it grows such beautiful things and such beautiful relationships. And like when I left that world, the hardest thing for me was leaving. I worked with a technical director, and it was so hard for me to walk away from. I mean, I texted him last night, you know, he's one of my like chosen family people, because it builds such connections, because you're on set with these people and you're, you know, these late hours and you're trying to figure it all out. And it's a very special world.
Yeah, there are definitely relationships that are built in the short, intense periods of time when you're working with people. And then, of course, this is why you see people in that world work together consistently over decades, because once you've found your chosen family, it's just as intense as your real family. Without the arguments over Thanksgiving dinner.
Exactly. So, you can create really beautiful, you know, projects, and we're so excited.
Tell us a little bit though about you are a leadership coach too.
Yes, this is the newest of my fresh starts.
Yep.
So I started the Learning Academy because I had been teaching photography on so many digital platforms. And I was realizing that every time I went to a different digital platform, all I was doing was shuffling my audience from one to the next. The platforms themselves were not helping me grow an audience. I was helping them make money.
Yeah.
So I decided, okay, well, Joni Simon, who's a friend, had started her own learning platform, and I watched what she did with hers. And I was like, that's very similar to what I want to do. So Joni and I talked, and we decided that I should do what she did on the platform called Mighty Networks. So I started my own learning platform called Andrew Scrivani Academy, which is a ripoff of Joni Simon's classroom. And I brought my last fellowship groups that I taught on Speakeasy with me, and I grandfathered them into the platform so that they could continue the conversations we were having on Slack and have sort of a network that so it was the course that never ended.
Right.
Essentially.
I love that.
And then we offer memberships to the platform. And when you're a member on the platform, you're paying a monthly fee, but you're also getting a steep discount on any new courses that come in.
Right.
So right now, my first course that I'm going to be offering on there is called the Imposter Syndrome Bootcamp.
I love that.
So I'll tell you what the evolution of that was.
Yes.
When I was starting through the mentorship and fellowship programs, and then when I started my own platform, a lot of the people were coming to me for one-on-one coaching, or let me say mentoring.
Right.
I won't use coaching yet. One-on-one mentoring. And while I was doing this with them, it wasn't about aperture and shutter speed. And it ended up becoming about their lives and about what they needed as people to get through the blockages of what they were experiencing to become successful. Struggling with their confidence, dealing with imposter syndrome, dealing with the disappointments and the setbacks. So I was like, I'm not really prepared to do this professionally. So I started reaching out. I was like, well, what does this actually look like? And what it looks like is coaching. Yeah. And what coaching is a social science that requires training.
Yeah.
So I found a program at Rutgers University, which was 45 minutes from my place in New Jersey. And I enrolled in the program. Well, I applied for the program. You can't just enroll. Yeah. Applied for the program. I was accepted into the program. I just completed it last month. Amazing. It was 132. Thank you. 132 hours of instruction.
Yeah.
Plus an additional 100 hours of coaching that I have to do.
Wow.
To get eligible just to take the certification exam.
Wow.
And on top of that, I had to be coached myself throughout the program. So it was like going back to school, going to therapy, and starting a new career all at the same time.
Yeah.
So I'm at that point where I've logged over 100 hours of coaching. I passed my LCOP course. I've just graduated from my Rutgers course, got my certificate, and now I'm eligible to go take the ICF exam for my accreditation. This is going to become a part of this sort of new launching of my learning platform, but it's also going to become a coaching and consulting business.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So right now, currently, I'm consulting with some big food brands, and I'm consulting with some creative directors at other food brands independently. So it's sort of evolving into whatever expertise that I've gathered all these years, similar to our earlier conversation about work and all the things you bring with you. I'm carrying a very large sack of experiences with me, and I'm bringing them to this new endeavor.
I love that. That's amazing. And you're going to be so successful in that because you have such an amazing energy, and you're so non-judgmental and just like open to people's experiences and supporting people. And we talk a lot about limiting beliefs here, and Jenny and I talk a lot about this. And, I feel like you're one of those people that somebody could come to and say, I want to be the first person on Jupiter. And you'd be like, let's do it. How do we get you there?
Yeah.
And so I love that because you do need to surround yourself with people that believe in everything you're doing. And so that's so exciting for us to see you do that. If people are going through a fresh start in their life, what would be some wise words that you could give them?
Well, I think goals and intentions. I think that when you have to set goals, you have to know what it is that you're working toward, and then do whatever is set out in front of you with firm intention. If you're not clear about what you want, then it's very difficult to figure out where you want to go to get there. So that's one of the things in terms of the coaching. And it's funny that you talked about limiting beliefs, because we talk about that in coaching training, right? Almost on like day one.
Yeah.
So it's a really important thing to understand that you have to believe that whatever's possible for you is possible, and then create a roadmap to get there.
Yeah.
A lot of what I do with coaching now is helping people just unpack all of the stuff that got them to here. When people ask me, well, like, what is coaching versus therapy? Well, I'm like, therapy is looking over your shoulder, figuring out how you got here. Coaching is about looking forward, figuring out how I'm going to get up there.
Yeah.
And it's about accepting where you are and then figuring out a path forward.
Yeah.
Because looking backwards is fine, and it's healthy and it's good. But at the end of the day, you still land here in the real world with your problems, with your anxieties, with the other things that are troubling you. And you have to figure out a path to go forward.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. So that's the best advice I can give you. You have to set goals and know what you want, and you have to be able to make a plan on how to get there.
I love that. And then our last question, which you also ask on your podcast, which we didn't even know today. What is the last thing that you ate and truly loved?
I made Going Green chili. Going Green curry.
Okay.
So during the pandemic, I was doing this thing on Creative Live TV, this live cooking show. It was ridiculous and funny. I had a GoPro attached to my chest and I was cooking on the stove, and my co-host was an Indian woman. And one of the things that obviously was coming out at this point, we're talking about like late spring, summer of 2020. This is post George Floyd. This is post Bon Appetit implosion.
Yeah.
And we were talking a lot about appropriation, right? Cultural appropriation. So we were in the middle of doing this show, and I was cooking a lot of the foods that I was familiar with. But I said to Kate, why don't you teach me how to cook your food? Give me your favorite recipe and teach me how to cook it. And we'll do that for the show this week. And we did it. She taught me how to make this Going Green chili. She had her dad's handwritten recipe that she sent me a photograph of, which I still have. And I make it now like once every couple of months because I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite things to eat. And I'd never made it before. And I made it for company the other night, and I had leftovers, and I ate it for lunch again yesterday, and it was amazing. So
leftover curry is really...
It was better the second day.
It's better the second day.
It was so good.
My fiance and I we like make curry, and then we'll be like, can we get it for 3 days? Because we're like, day 3 curry. That's the best curry. You know, it's very exciting when you have day 3 curry.
Yeah. So that growing green curry was so delicious. Yes.
That sounds great. Well, thank you for taking the time and talking to us, and for being here, and for inspiring so many people to live their dreams and just like go for it, because you have just gone for it. And look at, like, it's just inspiring to watch where you are, and we're so excited to see where you're going and for everything you're doing. So please keep us posted, and just thank you for being you and being here.
Well, I appreciate it. And I am proud to see both of you as such present, just productive, and just generous young women. And thank you so much. It makes whatever I was to you as a child, I'm so happy to see who you've become as adults.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's story. We're always here, and we're proud of you. Until next time, brave one.
A Fresh Story is brought to you by Fresh Starts Registry, the first and only platform for everything you need to start again. You can read the show notes and learn more about today's episode at freshstartsregistry.com/podcast.